The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Get involved with Access Fort Wayne and make your own television programming. Call 421 1250 to find out more.
Good evening. Well, thanks for coming. My name's Brian West. My full-time job, I work at the Jorgensen YMCA as the Senior Program Director. I'm also a member of the Fort for Fitness Wellness Committee. And on behalf of our committee, we'd like to welcome you to our continued series, and tonight focusing on stress. I just want to talk briefly about Fort for Fitness. If you've been on our website, or if you haven't been on it lately, our website's changed. And actually what myself and Judy and Mary, we're all part of the Wellness Committee, and we have a initiative, what we call For Your Health, which is part of Fort for Fitness. And the objective is we want really people to think about fitness more than just the weekend in terms of what we do with the Fort for Fitness, with the half marathon and the 10K and the 4 mile and the kids marathon and seniors marathon. We want people to think about healthy living, including nutrition and exercise and stress, tobacco management, things like that. And For Your Health provides you with all kinds of tips and resources. We basically, on our website, it's kind of a one-stop shop. So if you want to get information on grocery shopping tips, or if you want to get, healthy tips on snacks for kids after school, or, starting an exercise program, or, if you're really thinking about quitting smoking, it's kind of a one-stop shop. We've got articles, we've got monthly themed articles, we've got tips, we've got resources. We also have a community calendar, so if you want to see what's going on in our community from a health and wellness, nutrition standpoint, we have that available as well. So if you haven't been on our website, we've got information at the table with our website address. Do check it out. So just a couple of other things before we introduce Dr. Johnson. If you haven't already, hopefully you already did when you came in, is make sure that you signed in for our door prize drawings. We have 4 different door prize drawings tonight that we're giving away. And then also after our last session in June, we're actually going to give from all the entries throughout the months that we've done this, we'll give away 1 free entry to the Fort for Fitness, and it's to the event of your choice. So, so make sure that you've done that if you haven't done so. You should have a handout when you came in. If not, let us know, and we'll make sure you get a copy of the handout that Dr. Johnson will be referring to on his presentation. And there's also yellow sticky notes. There'll be some question and answer time, and if you'd rather not verbally ask, if you just want to write it down, we can collect those, and Dr. Johnson will be glad to address those. So if you have any other questions about Fort for Fitness or what we do as a wellness committee with For Your Health, please make sure and let us know. We'll be glad to direct you and guide you accordingly. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Dave Johnson. Dave is a professor at St. Francis and also is involved with the Parkview Employee Assistance Program. And tonight's focus is going to be on stress. So hopefully when we all leave here tonight, we'll be all de-stressed, right? That's right. All right. So without further ado, I'll welcome Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Can you all hear me okay without the microphone? Yes or yes? Yes. Yes. Okay. Glad you're here this evening. Are you here? Are you sure you're here? Because, the reality, many times people are here, but they're really not here. They're somewhere in their brain. They're in the past, thinking about all the stuff, or they're in the future, worried about all the stuff. But tonight, we're here, and this is a safe spot. This is a safe place. I mean, no tornadoes tonight. Ceiling's not going to cave. And this is a relaxed conversation. Because this is a small group. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to answer those questions. Because they're filming it, and it's going to be on Access TV, if you're uncomfortable with your voice on TV, please, write your question out along the way on the little yellow stick-em, and one of our folks will pick it up from you. I'm comfortable with questions throughout. I really am. Stop me along the way. I'm a bit of a rambler. I'm a teacher. I like to teach. I like to present. And so please interrupt. Stop me with your questions along the way. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. This notion of stress is huge. Back in the middle 1970s, when I first became a nurse, well, first of all, there weren't very many boy nurses back in those days. Yeah. And I'll never forget some of the stories that, my parents were mortified. What were they going to tell their family and friends about their son being a nurse? Boy, times have changed a little bit since then, thank goodness. But I recall early in my nursing career that we never saw men before the age of 50 have a heart attack. And we've never saw women premenopausal. And with our fancy-dancy drugs and our awareness of treatment and meds, you'd think that those statistics would be better, but they're not. And many of those illnesses, cancers, hypertension, heart disease, fibromyalgias, lots of the mental disorders, anxiety, depression. The number one drug in America are the anxiolytics, the anti-anxiety meds, and followed very closely by the antidepressants. So we know that those things are in epidemic proportion to what's taking place. And most of it, a huge piece of it, is related to this little old thing called stress. And it's huge. And it's huge because you're secreting a chemical called cortisol every time you become stressed. Cortisol's is a very primitive response. If you were being chased in the woods by a bear, you would want cortisol to be released because you would want your pupils to dilate and your heart to beat a little bit faster and your lungs to expand and your muscles to contract so that you could fight or you could run, you could flee. And so cortisol is very helpful with that stress response. But unfortunately, that switch gets left on for long periods of time. Are you here? Are you sure you're here? Because sometimes when we drift to other than here, into the past or the future, we're still secreting that cortisol. I'm driving my car from point A to point B. On my way, a dog runs out in front of me. In a nanosecond, I hit the brake and say something like, "Darn dog." I avoid the dog, but little jolt of cortisol. No big deal. It worked. I was on autopilot. I get to work, I'm at the coffee pot, and I'm telling people about the darn dog. My brain, in the past, tells the story that's housed in the amygdala, the part of our brain that has the pictures, that I can still remember that darn dog running out in front of me, and I get another jolt of cortisol. And so, make no mistake, that which was positive initially can continue to influence over and over and over again our stress response. I didn't know how famous Dr. Selye was going to be when I met him in the 1970s. He was traveling the world because he was the little Canadian researcher that had coined the word stress. And he said stress is a nonspecific response to any demand or change. And he had this French accent, and he was really difficult to listen to and to understand. And I visited him up in South Bend with a group of nurses. And we listened to him, but he hypothesized about stress based upon his laboratory animals. We couldn't measure it. We couldn't measure the chemicals back then, and we couldn't film the brain. We had no MRIs. We had no brain scans. We couldn't see what was happening. But Dr. Selye was right. he hypothesized that there was a chemical reaction taking place with this fight or flight mechanism, and that over a period of time, illness would occur if there was too much of it. And so he said, and he coined the word stress. Before Dr. Selye, we did not have a vocabulary for stress. We thought stress perhaps was that gnawing ache in the belly of within our belly, our gut. And yet he was right that the nonspecific response, nonspecific, it's your body. It impacts you physiologically. Your heart, your mind, your spirit, your heart, your lungs, every part of us is impacted if we have too much stress. It's nonspecific to any demand or change. Demand or change? Y'all having a little bit of change? There's been more change in the past 20 years than ever before in history. There's been more change in the last 10 than in the previous 20. There's projected to be more change in the next 3 than in the previous 10. I see a pattern, and it's not slowing down. I know as being a nursing professor, I'm almost embarrassed. I am embarrassed. I'm completely embarrassed by how much we're trying to get into the brain of a new nurse. Once upon a time, it took 5 years for many of us to get through nursing programs. And my stack of books for nursing for all 5 years was about this high. That would get the average nursing student maybe through a semester and a half. They say, Dr. Dave, why don't you just give us one of those little flash drives and we'll just pop it in the back of our brain and we could just download it. If it could be that simple. The average high school student today processes more bits of information in 1 year of high school than their grandparents did in a lifetime. I have 6 children. My oldest is 30. My youngest is 20. You do the math. How many of you have children? When do your children stop becoming a source of stress to you? When they move away. Perhaps. But they'll text you. They'll text you. So we know that you didn't get the phone. She didn't get the message. This notion of stress and resiliency is so important because how do we define it? How does it impact us? And can we build resiliency to cope more effectively is the question. We know that we can't change it because Selye was right on his money. A nonspecific response to any demand or change. And change is with us. That's not going away. So we're all vulnerable. We're extremely vulnerable. So what can we do to build capacity? How we can deal with it? How can we turn cortisol off, you might ask? Let me tell you the rest of the story. So, metaphor. One way to begin to think about stress and the adaptation from stress is through brain pictures. Throughout tonight's program, I'm going to be using several metaphors or pictures. And most of us can think about rapids, yes? We can think about being in a boat or a raft and getting dragged along by the white waters and how uncomfortable that would feel if we felt a loss of control. And in essence, that's what happens to us when we begin to experience too much stress. We like a certain amount of stress. I mean, it's stress that the alarm goes off in the morning and gets us out of bed. It's stressful for those of us that have a regular fitness program. How many of you have a regular fitness program? Yeah, how many of you know you should have a regular fitness program? Yeah, you have shouldy attitudes. You know what you should be doing. But the majority of us experience stress just thinking about it. And so this picture image of rafting is important for us to get a handle in terms of what stress is, getting dragged along, so to speak, the fear component that's connected to it, the uncomfortableness, the feeling out of control with it. But that metaphor is also helpful in terms of how do we get out of the water? Where's the life preserver? Who can help us? How do we turn it around to be able to see it as an adventure versus an insurmountable barrier, an insurmountable task? We know that technology is driving huge amounts of this. In fact, most of us are wired 24/7. I remember I was counseling. In addition to being a nurse, I'm licensed in marriage and family and clinical social work. And so I was seeing a burned out professional person, a person with compassion fatigue, a person who was burned out because of stress, of caring. And I remember coming back from a workshop to see this individual, and the workshop was on resiliency, and Mr. Gates was speaking about resilient teams. And he said, teams in the new millennium would be resilient because they could communicate at the speed of thought, because they have digital nervous systems. I thought, whoa. So Bill Gates is taking a metaphor, right, from the human body. Isn't this interesting? Isn't this extremely interesting? And how he's conceptualizing, and this was in 2000, that we would be able to communicate, bam, at the speed of thought. Way cool. He knew what he was thinking in terms of Palm Pilots and iPhones. No, he wasn't thinking iPhone. Wrong man. Okay. But this notion of instantaneous, very cool. But as I was coming back to counsel my burned out, compassion-fatigued individual, I began to think about using Bill's metaphor and flip it back to him at a computer perspective. What happens to our computers when they don't have enough random access memory? Slow down. Stop. Not work. And so what do we do with our computer at work or home when it slows, stops, won't work?
Reboot it.
We reboot it. We absolutely do. We turn it off, we turn it on. Woohoo, we hope it works. We do alternate control delete end task. Yeah, that little 4-stage maneuver, right? If that doesn't work, we call somebody from IS if we're at work. If we're at home and there happens to be a 10-year-old in the home, we're safe because they can figure it out. But this notion of defragging and rebooting ourselves is critical for this notion of renewal. What are we doing to reboot? What are we doing to defrag? And so I think it real quickly in terms of that metaphor of alternate control delete end task. Turn that around for your brain in the reboot. Simply asking the question, what are my alternatives, switches us from one part of our brain, the amygdala, to the prefrontal cortex. Simply just asking the question takes us to a different place. What are the alternatives? Because many times when we're not here and we're there or there, we're stuck. We're stuck. The hamster wheel gets stuck. And so as soon as we say, what are our alternatives, we begin to shift and we open up our vision to a different reality, something else. Alternatives. Delete. Oh, this is a nice strategy. What can we stop doing? What can we stop doing in our lives? I've just given you the whole thing in terms of how we've added stress through technology, but do we turn the cube in terms of asking, what don't we have to do? Don't tell my wife, but I did not make the bed this morning. I didn't. I can't tell you the number of times I see parents and families and children come in with conflict. Dr. Dave, will you help us communicate better? Will you help us have less conflict? And I'll say, what's this conflict all about? His room is dirty. Close the bedroom door. If I close the bedroom door, the Board of Health might close us down. Don't invite them. Delete. What can we stop doing? Can we pick our battles? Can we choose them more wisely? Alternate. Control. Delete. Control? What do I have control over? It's a good question. It's a great question. Because most of our obsessional thinking is all the things that we have no control over. Talk about unnecessary release of cortisol. Control. What do I have control over? If I have no control over it, then let it go. Easier said than done. We're going to give you a metaphor for letting go. Alternate. Control. Delete. End task. It's a great one. Great psychological strategy. How many of you are list makers? Like to cross things off as you go? Isn't that cool? It's wonderful. You get things done. Get her done. Feels good. Anybody do something, then put it on the list so you get credit? Yeah. Schedule coffee. No, but it is psychologically rewarding. I say that many of the things that create our stress, we don't give ourselves credit enough for all the things that we are doing, that are working well in our lives. But we know that technology, complexity with moral, legal, ethical decision making, we know that stress is enduring. It lasts a long time. What do I mean? When things happen in our lives, death of a loved one, death of a spouse, death of a relationship, death of a way of being, my health is impacted, loss of a job, some physical health impairment. That's a loss. It's a huge loss. It has an enduring impact. It's not that we can't be whole again, but it means it lasts a long time. It's enduring. Stress is cumulative. It's not only that gas is way too high. You see that? I was driving home from work yesterday, and it was like, it's only $3.92. Oh my gosh, it's dropped again. You know, is that a psychological mess up or what? Because now it's lower than $4. It's good. It's like, what? No, it's not. Cumulative. Cumulative. It's not only finances. It's not only our personal stress, our family stress, our work stress. It's all of those things combined that we're releasing that cortisol. And of course, it's perceptual. It's perceptual. It's where you live in your brain. Are you living in the past? Are you living in the future? Are you able to take your brain off autopilot? Let's use the metaphor once again. I'm driving from point A to point B on autopilot. I don't know whether you ever do this. You're going home, but I really don't want to go to point B tonight. Actually, this happened to on my way to Parkview this morning, you know. I was driving to my office at Parkview, and voila, I went to my office that I've been at for about 5 years instead of my new office, which I changed 2 months ago. Autopilot. I got all the way to my old office, and I said to myself, isn't that interesting? I hope I didn't run any red lights. Autopilot. Where are we in our brain? Can we come back to here, to the now, to the present moment? Because here is safe. Here's where we can get respite, relaxation. Here's where we can begin to challenge the autopilot of our perception, how we perceive and define the stress that we have. Because if we perceive it and define it in such a way that's insurmountable, we are secreting a whole bunch of stress hormone. Words influence. Be careful what's creeping out of your mouth. If you say your job is killing you, it is. Literally. Words create pictures. If I said to you, close your eyes, and I won't because you might fall asleep. It's way too dangerous to be having anybody close their eyes tonight. But if I said, close your eyes, and over the next 30 seconds, see a big gray elephant. See a big gray elephant, see a big gray elephant. You would all see a big gray elephant. Now, some of you might see the big gray elephant in the jungle. Some of you might see it in the zoo. Some of you might see it in a toy store. But I am willing to bet not one of you would see BIGGREYELEPHNT scroll across your brain. You wouldn't see it as a teletype. You would see it as a picture. A picture. Isn't that interesting? But what happens when you say, do not think of a big gray elephant? What do you think of? The big gray elephant. Now, this is just a silly old example. But many of us think in pictures, all sorts of pictures. And they're not necessarily pretty pictures. Things that have created stress in our past. Things that we worry about and obsess in our future. The picture. Also, the goals that we set. Silly old goals. Diet. What's the picture of diet, I might ask, for those of us that want to eat healthy? What's the picture of diet?
Denial.
Say denial. What are we denying?
The good stuff.
The good stuff. And what does the good stuff look like? Chocolate. Ice cream. Yeah, now think about this. So we're in our brain thinking, do not, you cannot have, you cannot have, you cannot have. I mean, we're obsessing about it. And suddenly we break down, and what do we say? I don't have any willpower. That's what we call crazy thinking. The better goal is to be able to say, what am I moving towards? What does it look like? What does healthy eating look like? Is a very different notion. Be careful of words. Be careful of words, especially when we're setting goals to be more resilient. If you set stopping goals, oh, just say no to drugs. Silly old campaign. I'm going to stop smoking. What's the picture? Silly old goal. Be careful. The goal sets the tone for that which we obsess about and that which we move towards. Some of my postdoc work is in clinical hypnosis. If I'm working with a diver, it's not about how not to belly flop to the right or to the left. It's about going through the perfect dive. And with resiliency, with human resiliency, we need to ask ourselves the question, what does that look like? I'll tell you what it looks like. Resiliency has something to do with these kind of observations. This notion of goal. Making sure that the goal is pointed in the optimal, that which we value, the ideal. That's the goal versus stopping. Stopping goals is like not seeing the big gray elephant. We're always trying to picture the ideal in terms of resiliency and health. Number two, this notion of learning orientation shifts us over to prefrontal. As soon as I say, if I'm dwelling on something in the past, or if I'm unable to get something out of my brain, as soon as I say, well, isn't that interesting, I move over to prefrontal. Challenge yourself. Be careful of being judgmental of your past inability to make change. Change is very difficult. And when we beat ourselves up for not being successful, we get stuck. It's like, how many of you have a ring on your finger? Raise your hand. Yeah. How many of you knew you can feel the ring on your finger right now? You can. Think about it. Can you feel it right now? Kind of, sort of. But you couldn't feel it until I told you to think about it, right? But if I start having you think about it a lot, some of you are going to start getting very, very uncomfortable, like, oh my gosh, get that ring off, because it's too tight, right? Our preoccupation with something that we can't have or that's not the ideal or what we're learning creates havoc and stress. Relationship focused. I love this one in terms of resilience.